at the 2013 reunion of the Ripcord Association. We're talking now with Jim Campbell of Shreveport, Louisiana, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Jim, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in August 26, 1946 in Santa Barbara, California.
Okay. Now, did you grow up there?
No, I grew up, I was only born there. I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay. And what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
My father was a doctor.
Okay.
My mother was a housewife.
All right. And so you went to high school in Shreveport then?
I went to 4 high schools.
Okay.
All over the place.
All
But
right.
I graduated from a high school in Shreveport.
All right. So was there a particular reason why you were bouncing around between schools, or you don't have to tell me?
One might say the particular reason was I was a disciplinary problem.
Ah, so they moved you around a little bit.
Had to try the military schools and different ones. I didn't do well at any of them.
All right. So what year did you get out of high school?
I got out of high school in June of '64.
All right. And then what did you do after you got out of high school?
I went to LSU in Baton Rouge.
All right. And how did that go?
It was great.
Okay. So now
It was
you were,
awesome. It's indescribably awesome.
So how was, so you did well there, or just had a good time?
Well, I thought they were the same.
Well,
I thought doing well was having a good time.
okay.
I definitely did that.
Okay. And did you successfully graduate from the place?
I graduated in June of '68.
All right. And what did you major in while you were there?
Political science.
Okay. And what plans did you have for yourself at that point?
What plans?
Yeah, what did you think you were going to do when you got out of college?
Well, when I got out of college, my intention was to go to law school, and I had been accepted to go to law school at the University of Texas and in the summer of ’68. To do so, you had to enroll in ROTC because they'd done away with deferments after the Tet Offensive in that spring. And I was enrolled to be a naval officer, naval ROTC, and go to law school in Texas. That's what my plan was.
Okay, so what happened to that?
I came home to Shreveport and was going to pack my stuff and go down to Austin. And my oldest friend came over to my house and said he was getting drafted and wanted me to go in the Army with him on the buddy system.
Okay.
Which was, you could enroll. The Army had a program. If I went in, we could go in together, and you would go to basic AIT and OCS together in the same unit. And I said, well, I'm going in the Navy. I mean, I'm going to law school. He kept bugging me about it, and one night we were out drinking, and I said, oh, hell with it, I'll go with you. And as it was, we went down the next day to sign up on the buddy system of the program, and he flunked the physical.
Oh.
And I went.
All right.
That's what happened.
Well, so much for the Navy then, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So he wasn't even trying to, was he trying to flunk the physical, or did it just happen?
No, he just flunked it. He had a psoriasis, too bad.
Okay. So skin condition keeps you out, and now there you are, and you're in. All right. Now, where do you go for basic training?
I went for basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey, basic and AIT at Fort Dix, and then OCS at Fort Benning.
Okay. Now, how did they run basic at Fort Dix? What was that experience like?
It was like basic for everybody. It's just basic training in the Army.
Now
it's what it is. It is.
Now, was this a class of people who were going to go to OCS, or was this a bunch of different people?
No, just different. It was basic IT was just typical soldiers.
Okay. So what kind of people did you have alongside you in basic then?
People from all over the country, all walks of life.
And how old were they?
Well, most of them, I'm going to say most of them predominantly were, they were 19, 18, 19,
Right, so
20.
regular.
They were younger than me.
Right, okay.
Because I was 21.
Now, because of your background, I don't know, did they give you some kind of leadership position in training, or did you just do the same stuff as the other guys?
Pretty much the same stuff. You know, I was a squad leader,
Yeah.
you know, in basic AIT.
Okay. But not any really big deal. Were there people there that you were in your basic training unit that were having problems or making problems?
Well, I mean, there are, to say in your company, there are always, taking a cross section of mostly draftees, there's always were problems, you know, but DIs handle problems pretty consistently.
Okay.
On that, they can deal with them, you know, and I don't know that there were anything out of the ordinary.
Okay. All right. So was that an 8-week course there, or?
Yeah, 8 weeks of basic, 8 weeks of infantry AIT.
And then how did the AIT differ from the basic?
Well, not much, but it was more training, you know, weapons training, and you know, the basic was more orientation. They taught you different infantry weapons,
Right.
you know, the skills and how to take them apart and do all that. Same kind of harassment, though.
How much of your ROTC experience carried over into this? Had you learned anything in ROTC that was useful here?
I never went in it.
Oh, okay. You were going to.
I was going to. I never went in the
So you're
Navy.
going to do it while you were in law school?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's as new to you as to anybody else.
I had 2 years. LSU was a land grant college, and every male that attended it in that period of time had to take 2 years of ROTC.
Okay.
But the final 2 years you didn't.
Right.
I didn't do that.
Right. Okay. So you have some familiarity with the basic military stuff then?
Yes.
Out of that. Okay. So you kind of go through that. Now, were the people who were the instructors then in basic or in AIT, what proportion of them do you think had been to Vietnam?
The sergeants had. My basic training officers, neither company and the training officer, neither one of them had. But the sergeants had, the drill sergeant.
All right. Now, were the officers kind of young guys who were just out of OCS or whatever, or were they older guys who just hadn't gone?
You know, I won't say they weren't. The officer wasn't much older than me,
Yeah.
and they hadn't gone.
Yeah. So they might well have been doing this as part of their preparation to go. At least there were
Could
other
have, could
some
have. I don't know.
Some officers did that. They were
Yeah,
going
I
with the
wasn't
training
privy.
command.
I don't know what they're. You know, they just all I knew is they weren't Vietnam veterans
Right. Okay.
at the time.
But of course, they're not going to be really chummy with you anyway. So
Yeah.
you know, don't learn that much. Okay. So you go through that, and then what's your next step after AIT?
OCS at Fort Benning.
All right.
That's 6 months long.
Okay. Now, what are the basic components of that program?
In my view, nothing but a harassment. It was a harassment, and
Okay. But did they take you out on field exercises and that kind of thing?
yeah,
All right. And did any of those have any value in themselves?
I got nothing out of OCS.
Okay.
It was the most wasted 6 months of my life. Didn't train me to do. Trained you a few things and weapons and you know stuff, but it was nothing but a bunch of waste of time.
All right. Now, do you think that was sort of the nature of the program, or just the guys that were training you, or?
I think it was the nature of the program.
All
I
right.
think it was absolutely insane that they were teaching conventional Army tactics when we're fighting an unconventional war.
Okay. So they weren't really gearing a lot of it then to Vietnam?
Pardon?
They weren't really gearing it to Vietnam?
No.
No. Are you going to go fight the Soviets in Germany or something?
Right. Well, you got to understand there was a big contingent over in Germany.
Yeah.
But that was the conventional Army
Right.
deal.
Okay. Because some of the people who went through that had different experiences, or it worked better for them, but some of them were of the opinion that it was gearing them for Vietnam, but that's why we do interviews. But your experience, okay, but you stuck it out.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Just as an example of it. You spend all these days on conventional troop formations for conventional warfare. And there's only one in Vietnam, a FILE.
Mm-hmm.
We should have been spending all the time on file formation of what you do when you move.
Right.
How you set up doing that. They didn't do that. They had diamond formation, all this kind of crap.
So you can
Nobody
deploy
did.
different subunits out in
and
lines
but
and all of this
it was
kind of
just
thing.
wasted.
All right. Yeah, so you've got, but you stuck it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how did you actually do in the class in terms of how they graded you or rated you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I never was. I don't know. I never cared, and I didn't care what they
Okay,
did.
you didn't care what number you came out
No.
or anything like that, and the
I
expectation.
probably was in the middle somewhere
All right.
because I intentionally wanted to be.
So you do well enough that you are fine, but not well enough to stand out.
I've never been a standout at anything in the Army.
All right. Okay. So you get this. So when do you actually finish OCS then?
I finished OCS in April 24th of 1969.
Probably. Yeah. All right. And now, do you have some kind of assignment in the
Yeah,
States?
I had assignment. I was assigned to Fort Lewis, Washington, as a training. Training. I was a rifle instructor
Okay.
for 5, 6 months.
All right. And what was that duty like?
Pretty bored.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what would your daily schedule be?
I take to every new training. Every AIT companies coming to teach them. I was an M16 instructor. I was in charge of that on the target range and the firing for record and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So every day you get a new company in, zero the weapons in the morning, fire for record fire.
And did you have some NCOs with you who kind of took care of the equipment? And...
Yeah, NCOs that were on the range, all of them were Vietnam veterans, most of them short timers.
All right. And did you get to know any of them at all or learn anything from them?
Actually, I got to know them. I don't know that I learned anything from them.
Did they talk much about their own experiences?
Not really. I mean, they did and they didn't. I mean, I think they were, there's always problems in the Army. So you got different kind of NCOs. You got people that they might be able to do one thing well and not so well in another one or whatever. Or they're problematic. I used to have to take the two of them I had. They gave me their paycheck because I would dole out the money to them every week because they couldn't do it. They'd spend it all the first weekend when they had any money, something like that.
Yeah. All right. So they were not necessarily going to be role model types or anything else.
Well, I mean, a couple of the ones that were short timers that had gone to Vietnam and were just biding time. No. But I had a couple of career NCOs. They were pretty good.
All right. So, and basically this sort of your leadership experience before going on to Vietnam to be a platoon leader or something, was that the idea?
Nothing.
Okay. So what do you actually know about Vietnam or what's going on over there when you actually go?
Nothing.
All right. And then, so when do you actually go to Vietnam then?
I completed that. And my OCS class had the same orders for Vietnam.
Right.
And we went to jungle school down in Panama.
Okay.
So we flew to, we all had the same orders out of Charleston, South Carolina. You went on leave, 30-day leave, and then you went to Charleston. They flew you down to Panama and went to jungle school, and then came back and then flew you to Vietnam.
Was the jungle school any more useful than OCS had been?
Yes.
Okay, what do they do there?
Well, you were out the whole time, more on training, map reading, ambushing, doing those things that you'd be doing. It was a much more effective training device to me.
Okay, and what kind of people were training you there?
Professionals. It was all professionals. NCOs.
Okay, but you had NCOs, but NCOs
all Vietnam veterans.
All with combat experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's at least of some value then.
Right.
All right. So you do that, you finish that, and then you get shipped over to Vietnam.
Right.
And then where did you fly out of? You were Fort
I
Jackson?
flew out of Travis.
Right, okay, so out of California.
Landed in Benoit.
All right. And what happens to you? Oh, I guess what's your first impression of Vietnam once you get to Benoit?
I don't know. Didn't have one.
Okay. So it wasn't somebody who didn't necessarily notice the heat or the smell or anything like that. You just get there.
Just place to be.
Okay. All right. And then how long do you stick around Benoit before you go somewhere else?
We stayed there. They had the Orient. I went to, you go to nanny's replacement there. It signs you out to the divisions
Right.
for one day. You stay there one day. Then it just so happened I got assigned to the 101st, and the CERT's orientation school of the 101st was in Benoit.
Okay.
Even though the division was up north.
Right.
And,
Sort of the air mobile training, when you rappelling and that kind of thing.
right, it was rappelling, a lot of rappelling.
And had you done stuff like that back in OCS? All right. Because you get that, and from there they send you up.
Did it in jungle school.
Right.
They had a rappelling section there in jungle school, but you did it, in Vietnam there.
All right.
For I don't know how long it was. It was about 10 days.
Yeah, about a week or 10 days is what most people do.
Yeah.
Now, when you were doing that school, did they put the officers and the enlisted together, and you all did it at once, or did the officers do it separately?
Well, like I said, in my class there was 125 OCS graduates, and if my recollection is right, 13 of us went to the 101st. And it was a barracks, like an army barracks.
Right.
I don't remember. I'll
Okay.
be honest with you. I remember the officers being in it.
Right.
I assume there were enlisted men in it too. I don't know. They came in, whoever came off the plane and got assigned there that day,
All right.
go here, go here.
You did go kind of in as a group. All right. And then how do they get you up to the 101st?
Well, they took us on C-130 and flew us to Fubai. No, not Fubai. Yeah, Fubai.
Oh, Camp Evans, or Eagle rather?
No, Fubai was south.
Okay.
It was the airfield up there for all that. And, they trucked you up to the battalion
Okay. So now
at Camp Evans.
right. Now, and so
I was assigned to the 2506.
okay, 2nd Battalion, 506th Infantry. All right. And do you start as a platoon leader, or do you?
Yes.
Okay.
I was sorry.
Can I get you some water?
November,
Okay. So
sometime by the time I got to Vietnam in October, but by the time I got through the school, it was like some part of November.
okay, so you go November '69, and where is the company at the time? Are they based at Evans now, or are they somewhere
No,
else?
they were out in the bush.
Okay.
When I got there, they were at Charlie Company was on Firebase.
Were you near Evans, or were they out
No,
up in the hills?
it wasn't near Evans.
Were they on Airborne, or?
No, it was they were assigned to, I can't remember, it's Firebase, is it Bastogne?
Bastogne is like best. There were people at
There were
Bastogne.
fire bases on the road going out
Okay.
to south end Bastogne, and
Yeah.
then we moved to Birmingham, I think. Could have been right there when they moved.
Okay, but these are on the kind of the ridge line, sort of the east of the Ashot Valley.
In the south end,
Yeah,
going out from Way,
Right,
going
right.
out from Way. South of Camp Evans.
yeah.
But it was only just, we were serving like, while that battalion went on R&R, went on 7-day stand down or
Yeah.
something. It wasn't long.
Okay.
Then we got moved to Firebase O'Reilly, which was out in the mountains north.
Right. All right. What kind of reception do you get when you join the company? Did you fly out and join them in the field?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're going to go in by helicopter and go into whatever. Were they on an LZ or in the fire base? Or?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay. And what kind of reception do you get when you arrive?
Well, every lieutenant that takes over a new platoon, there's always anxieties with the
Yep.
platoon. I guess they had a lot of anxieties about a new lieutenant.
What approach did you take when you joined them? How did you present yourself, or what did you do?
I don't know. That's interesting. What did I do?
Well, I mean, in other words, did you start giving orders, or did
Oh,
you
absolutely.
just... Okay.
No, I mean, but not. I had a one. I'll do it in segments.
Mm-hmm.
The first segment, the first 3 months, I was with them. I was the third platoon leader.
Mm-hmm.
Or about 2.5 months, and then Captain Vasquez took over. He took over the company about a month
Mm-hmm.
after I was there, and he created 4 platoons,
Mm-hmm.
and then I became, at some point in time, the 4th platoon leader, and then I became later the 2nd platoon leader. So a little bit different than most people, had knew more people in the company
Mhm.
at different, because I commanded the different platoons.
Right. And, but I guess part of it is that sometimes a new lieutenant will go in and just start telling everybody else what to do. Others will kind of start talking to the NCOs
Yeah.
and kind of figure out what's going on and work with them rather than against them. So kind of, is that...
You're right, you're correct. I had what I did was, when you're a lieutenant, you come very close and attached to your radio operator.
Mm-hmm.
And I relied on the radio operator for knowing who the people were in the
Mhm.
unit.
Okay.
And I had a de facto platoon sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
He was a black Spec 4. He was a Spec 4, and he was outranked, but he was the de facto
Mm-hmm.
acting as a platoon sergeant when there was a platoon sergeant and there were squad leaders and that. He was one of the best natural leaders I've ever known.
All right. And so did you get along with him?
He helped me tremendously.
Okay. So you're learning from the guys who were there and
Yeah,
can kind of
absolutely.
and then kind
No
of
question about it.
figure out as you go sort of what to do. Okay. Now, during that sort of first month that you're there, are you kind of learning the ropes and figuring things out? Okay. And now are you still up in the hills in that first month, or do they move you back to?
Well, what happened is we were in O'Reilly the month of December,
Mm-hmm.
and it was during the monsoons, and the weather got too bad, and they had to they closed, they take those, in the mountains, they have to close the fire bases
Right.
because they can't get flying to them.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to get there is by flight. So they moved us at the end of December down to the foothills.
Mm-hmm.
Not mountains where they could, fly.
Right.
That was around the end of right there at the end of the year.
Okay. And at what point does Vasquez take over the company?
Right, he took over the company. What happened is the battalion came in for a stand down at the end of the year, like January 1st.
Right.
Second. Vasquez took over the company during the stand down.
All right. And what was your first impression of Vasquez?
He was not a man to suffer fools.
Mm-hmm.
And you learned that in about 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome.
And
It was no nonsense.
And did he start to try to kind of shape up the company or make it what he wanted it to be? Or?
Absolutely.
All right. And what was important to him? What did he want? What did he expect of you as a platoon leader or of the men?
He expected you as a platoon leader and related to me, never it was words to this effect. Never do anything, never ask a soldier to do anything you wouldn't do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
Okay. And did he have the company operate differently from the way that Captain Hale had or anybody else?
Yes.
What kinds of things did he do?
we worked in small groups, not company size,
Right.
not even platoon size. For the first 4 months I was over there. So you were always in small groups. If you were a platoon leader, you had 3 machine gun, 3 squads, 3 machine gun teams, 3 radios. Say an average platoon was 25 to 30 people, depending on who was where and when, And so you were small ambush teams working. You might come together for a resupply every 3 or 4 days, but you very seldom at that time were a platoon, or never as a company.
Right. And how much did you see of Vasquez himself when you're out there in the field?
Well, I saw him a lot when I was the 4th platoon leader. And when I was 3rd platoon leader and the 2nd platoon leader, not as much.
And would he use the 4th platoon as sort of his reserve element, or the one that he traveled with, or?
He took turns traveling with
Okay.
people. His lieutenants. There was myself with the lieutenants, them were Charlie Lee, myself, and Bob Wallace. I don't know if you.
Yeah, we know Bob Wallace, yes.
Yeah. We were all platoon leaders together. They were there before I was.
All right. And then do you think that you kind of learned by working with Vasquez, or you become a
I
better?
learned everything I'd learned from Vasquez.
All right. And then.
Well, after he got there.
Right. Okay.
I learned more about it, soldiering. I learned everything I learned about soldiering that I hadn't learned from my Black Spec 4 that I told you about.
Right. Okay. Now, initially you're patrolling, and you're patrolling kind of foothills and lowland areas.
Yeah, during the monsoons.
Right. Then did you ever go up to the DMZ or that area?
No.
Okay. You didn't raid up in that direction. Okay. Then, as the monsoon starts to lift in March, then they start preparing for what becomes the Ripcord campaign. But your company is not the first one to go in. Did you operate in that area on the ground before you went up Ripcord? Or that you can recall?
I'm not prepared to make this statement, but I believe this. My platoon was the first platoon to move into the mountains from the lowland.
Okay.
And we walked in.
Yeah.
We didn't fly in because the weather was too bad. And we ended up getting socked in, and we went up and we walked in, and it wasn't until, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, the rest of the company the weather got them out there. They came out there.
All right. So you're out there by yourself?
Yeah, and then we moved as a platoon.
Right. And you're out there by yourself for a couple of weeks. And how were you supported? I mean, did you get food or anything like that?
Well, they'd wait for a break in the weather. We had some long breaks there. Very, very, 6, 7 without resupplies. Fortunately, we had no contacts where we needed, and I've always, nobody could have helped us. We could have supported us.
But there may not have been that many enemy around there quite yet.
Right.
All right. Now, eventually, they do try to open up Ripcord. 2 different companies from your battalion try to go in helicopters, and they fail, and then it becomes C Company's turn. Now, were you with the company when
Absolutely.
Okay, so tell me what happened that day. What did you do?
What happened there was that it was, Alpha Bravo had earlier and attacked in there. And Charlie Company was on Rocket Ridge at that time. We started running into some enemy. I think it was in March, early March, and they were, making their plans to assault in, and so the first assault failed, and the second assault, before they made that assault, and I don't remember the days, it was around April 1st.
Yeah, April 1st was the second assault.
Yeah, but before that, they CO'd us to open Firebase Gladiator to put a 105 battery on it to support the insertion in the Ripcord.
Right.
So on April 1st, we were building Gladiator. It'd been 3 or 4 days we were there building it, and then they made that insertion, and that didn't work. And then and Chuck Hawkinson, though, he is like, he had come in and replaced Charlie Lee as a lieutenant. And he was, Captain Vasquez went on R&R.
Right.
And he was the first lieutenant. Me and Bob Wallace were still second lieutenants when he got there. And we assaulted into an LZ just east of Ripcord. And not my platoon, one of the other platoons got in a firefight and whatever. And I want to say it was about 2 days later, maybe 3, we assaulted Ripcord from the east side, and there was no enemy.
All right. So you're just climbing up the side.
Just walking up the side.
And now you're on top, and now what happens?
We commenced building the firebase.
Okay. And what?
Now, Captain Vasquez was not there.
Yeah.
But we had commenced the building of Firebase Gladiator, which gave us an idea of how he wanted it. How, you know, and he wanted it different than any other firebase.
Right.
Have you heard that?
Yeah. Well, he's given me his version of it. And what do you
He
remember
wanted
about
nothing above the ground, which is not the way big firebase is all bunkered with standbags. He didn't want to fight, and he wanted fighting positions, you know, where you could fight from the position. So he created, every foxhole was like this. The perimeter, you're the enemy out there. Here's the foxhole facing the enemy, and then this was the sleeping position, dug in the ground. All of it was dug in the ground. They put well, I don't know what they call it, PSP or something, and sandbagged it, but you couldn't, and threw dirt on top. You couldn't see it from the ground.
Right.
And you had your fighting positions, all your claymores and everything hooked up here, where he didn't want anyone above the ground to know where we were.
Right.
That was the, you know, on the side of the firebase.
Right.
Now they had secondary positions up, other units that were supporting.
Yeah, get the artillery and all the rest of that stuff up there above you. But the fighting positions for the infantry guarding the perimeter, all dug in, nothing sticking up to be a target.
When we took Ripcord that day, Chuck Hawkins, Lieutenant Wallace, Bob Wallace, and myself set up the positions, and we set up 2-man positions when we first took it over, and a lot of them became 3-man positions as time. You know, we could jockey with them.
Okay. Now,
And we went to laying wire, and it was brutal. Worst job I ever had.
and what kind of wire were you using at that point?
Every kind the Army had. Captain Vasquez wire. He'd do it different than everybody.
Well, he said that he used both kind of old-fashioned barbed wire as well as concertina wire.
He used everything. Double apron, concertina. He Tanglefoot. You know, those were conventional engineering wires, but he created his own deal. He'd take concertina wire, which is about this high, mash it down to about here, and lay Tanglefoot over, and then concertina back on top of it.
And what was
Which is very, very difficult to do.
Okay. And what was the logic of all of that? What was that going to do?
The logic of that was, which he knew that no one else knew, was you couldn't get under it. You couldn't get under it because you had mashed concertina wire tied to Tanglefoot on top of it, tied to strands of high. So if you blew, if they say they had a torpedo, Bangalore or something, and blew a section of it, it would blow. They could blow the bottom, but they couldn't blow the top. You see, it would just be mass entanglements.
Yeah, and you couldn't just put something on top of the wire to crush it down.
And then we also laid the hog wire in between it. Like, here's a row of this, here's a ditch. You got to dig a ditch and put hog wire up. That's a different animal. And then the next level of this, the next level of that, the next going down toward you, the hill. It was brutal work. It was from daylight to dark, and nothing, no screwing off, no nothing. He was absolutely brutal.
Now, how long did it take you to set up that position then?
We did it, we were there about a month before we went back to the bush.
Okay.
And did it all day, every day. and people, I mean, he knew how important it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the Ripcord never got hit.
Yeah.
He did it. His idea.
All right.
And did it. And he wasn't going to have anybody. He'd been in war going to Korea. You know. He won't have anybody penetrate his perimeter.
All right.
Heard him say it many times. Got many an ass chewing from him during the time we were doing it. If you didn't lay that wire tight right, you relay it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. And so rather than, so this is not something that you know, the engineers were doing for you or anything else like that. The men had, the
They didn't
company
do
had to
nothing.
go do that.
Well,
they were digging the stuff out on
they
top.
were leveling the top of the hill and putting the batteries and digging
Right.
stuff, the secondary position.
Right.
Infantry did all that, what we're
Okay.
talking about.
All right. So you had your full instructional course in fortifying a position, and you spent a month doing that. And then at the end of that month, do you go back to Evans or just out in the field?
And we go back out the bush.
Okay. Now, was that
And just rotate the company on
Right.
the Firebase.
Right.
And everybody, believe me, they were loving going out to the bush.
All right.
It's the only time it ever happened, because the Firebase is generally a lot safer than the bush. But then it didn't matter. People didn't, they wanted off, I don't say it, they wanted relief from
Right.
work.
All right. So now, let's see. So we went up in April, so now we're getting into May now by the time you go back out in the bush. You spent about
Yeah.
a month up there?
Yeah, we spent about a month up
Okay.
there.
And then you spend the next few weeks kind of patrolling out in the...
We went way out, and we made I don't know where I tell you where we went today, I don't know. We went way out.
Okay.
And then we humped back along the ridge lines that came down from 902 and other places, that whole area east of Ripcord.
Mm-hmm.
And we walked back in the, you know, different ridge lines and areas way east and south of Ripcord.
Now, at this point, were you operating as platoons or? Okay.
Platoons.
All right. And how?
That's when we began operating as a platoon.
Okay. And about how big were the platoons at this point?
25, 30, so in that range.
Right.
You know, any given day could be one or the other.
Right.
You know, somebody's on R&R, somebody's got a problem.
Okay. And at this point, which platoon do you have? Are you second platoon by this time, or?
Yes.
Okay. And I know that by the time you got to Hill 902 at the end of June, you're down to 3 platoons again. Or at least
3 platoons.
Yeah.
Well, we were 3 platoons when we went back out.
Okay. So you were only 4 platoons for a little while.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And were you getting much contact at this point?
You're talking about it before June?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Nothing, not significant contact, no.
Okay. As far as you can tell, things are going the way they're supposed to be going?
Well, what happened is, we would start finding, somewhere in there we found a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
We found bunkers, and, you know, and had a few not sustained not sustained contacts.
Right.
And then we came in for the stand down, the battalion stand down in June.
Right.
And that was in about mid-June sometime. And then we went out, and that's when the game had changed.
Mm-hmm.
We started running into enemy here, everywhere.
Okay. Now, had Vasquez been rotated out of the field
Yes.
now?
Yes.
Okay. And so who's your new captain?
Captain Hewitt.
Okay. What impression did you have of him?
Captain Hewitt was a nice, good man. He was a good man. He had a tour previously in Vietnam, and he had been an ARVN advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was his, his point of relativity.
Right.
And he had not been in the mountains. He'd been somewhere in Vietnam, different terrain.
Right.
And he just never got a chance to, he was only there 10 days when he got killed.
Okay. And now, do you get R&R sent to the rear at some point around this time, or?
Well, we went in for the stand down.
Yeah.
When he took over, he swapped out with Captain Vasquez.
Right.
And then we go back out to the field, I don't want to say mid-June, maybe somewhere in there. And I was just, at that point, was supposed to leave the field. I was been out there a long time.
Right.
And Colonel Lucas had told me that I would do, he didn't tell, that I'd be out there 10 days to break into new captain. But I wasn't with him but one day, so I don't know what I could do, you know.
You were with him for a day, but I guess the company is going to get hit on Hill 902, sort of June 30, July 1, but you weren't on 902.
No, I was on R&R.
You are. That's what I was asking. You didn't actually answer
I
that
went
question.
in thinking I was in the rear.
Right.
So my time in the field was over.
Okay.
And Colonel Lucas wanted me to take my R&R, which I hadn't taken, before I take my new assignment.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's how I missed
So coming out of the stand down, then you are
out there about 10 days.
okay, and then you come back. You go to R&R. Where do you go for R&R?
Sydney, Australia.
All right. And were you? I don't know. How easy or hard was it to come back after being in the world for a week or so?
I mean, I knew I was going back. I thought I was going back to the rear.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
rear
So
job, so it didn't bother me.
all right.
That wasn't nothing, it was just part of the tour.
Okay. And then you.
I did break a few hearts while I was down there.
There you go.
In Sydney, but that's another story.
All right. So So when do you return from R&R?
I returned. I'm trying to think of my dates. 28th was there, the 7th was there, the 6th of July.
Okay. And had you known what had happened to the company before you got back?
No, I came through the gate. When I came through the gate at Camp Evans, the gate.
Right.
They dropped me off at the gate. I checked in with the MPs there at the gate. They had a Jeep waiting for me. To whisk me back to the field.
Okay.
They took me straight. That's the first time I found out. They said people said your unit's been overrun. You're not going. You're going. I have orders to take you to the helipad.
Okay.
It was late in the day, and they whisked me out there to the company.
All right. And so that's when.
That's the first time I met Jeff Wilcox.
Okay. And Wilcox is the new captain
He had taken over.
that Lucas wants you to break in.
No, Hewitt was the
Okay,
captain.
okay.
Lewis wanted me to break in.
All right.
Hill 902 had happened, and Jeff had taken over the company when Captain Hewitt got killed.
Right. And Jeff had been a platoon leader already.
He'd been
so
a platoon leader at Alpha Company. I think my recollection is we met casually during the stand down.
Yeah, because he was commanding the
Echo Company.
Echo Company at that point. Yeah.
But I think I met him at the stand. Everything was. We only had 2 stand downs in a year. One, the one I'm talking about in June. That's the only time you got a chance to meet officers from other companies or something. I remember meeting Jeff there.
Okay. All right. So now about the 6th of July, you come back out, you join
That's
in.
the afternoon I came out.
Okay. And what condition was the company in now when you rejoined it?
They lost a lot of guys. And most of the guys lost were in my platoon at Hill 902.
Yeah.
Most of them. So you had a lot of anxiety and a lot of, I'm glad you're back, LT.
And then how many men were left in the company at that point?
Well, the next day, am I out of the picture?
You're okay.
I'm okay, so I gotta sit my leg up.
Yeah.
The next day, when I got in there late that evening, the next day we were moving. An element had been sent from Bravo Company had set out a mechanical ambush. Do you know about that?
You should explain it. I know, but the listener
Okay.
might not.
They set out they had set out a mechanical ambush when they were out in the bush, and they had then moved to Ripcord without retrieving it. So they had to retrieve it. So they sent 3 guys from Bravo Company to Charlie Company, because they knew where it was.
Yeah.
You don't want some guy, point guy from Charlie Company tripping it. So they came in to go retrieve it, and we were on the LZ where everything there was an LZ there. Paul Berkey was charged with the mission of going with them, and he took about half of his platoon over there. He was the 3rd platoon leader at that point, and they got ambushed going to retrieve it. The three guys were walking to get, they were 1, 2, 3 because they knew where it was.
Right.
And that's Dennis Bloomingdale and Bob Judd. I don't know if you've met them. They were terribly wounded. And Sergeant Berkey went up there and got drugs. Dennis Bloomingdale. When he was the point man.
Right. And that was yeah.
Okay. Heroes with John Kasich did a TV show about it. I don't know if you know that. Has anybody told you that? They did a 1-hour TV show
On Paul Berkey? All right.
and Dennis, him doing that.
All right. And that's also covered in this documentary that the people at Temple University were doing, or they were talking about Bloomingdale getting wounded. That was in that.
Who?
Dennis Bloomingdale getting wounded.
That's when he got terribly wounded.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, anyway.
That's in the documentary.
Right, yes. And so that's, okay, so this is your first day out back with the company again, and this happens, and then did you lose any of the men from
I
your
lost a
own
bunch of men that day. When they got hit, I was off the other side of the LZ with what was left of my company, my platoon, which was about 8 guys. And so I came back to when I heard it, I came back to the LZ with Jeff, and I said, I'm gonna go over there and get them out. And I took some people with me and went over there and helped Sergeant Berkey and all of them get extracted. There were a bunch of casualties from the shrapnel.
Right.
I mean, and one of my point men got killed over there, that day, Jerry Rissinger. But a lot of wounded, there's a lot of shrapnel. See, we were trying to get a medevac in to get these people out with a litter, and they were shooting at it with RPGs. And so the round would miss the helicopter and hit, and hit up there and killed a couple. Jerry Rissinger, and wounded a lot of people.
All right.
Both down in the valley and up on the ridge above it.
So now this company collectively has been hit pretty hard, really twice in the space of a week, because you had
Yeah, we
overrun.
lost like 14 men that day.
All right.
And we'd lost 20-something, 20, 30, I don't know,
Yeah. All right.
So we're down then to 30 men
Right.
in the company. And the next day, that evening, we get the wounded all extracted. That evening, we get called by Colonel Lucas we're going to be picked up in the morning because there's no mechanical ambush to pick up.
Yep.
And we were going to be inserted in the LZ that lies between Ripcord and Hill 1000. And we were going to assault the hill. Just another day. And we were.
All right. So what happened then the next day? What happens on July 8th?
July 8th, the choppers came at daylight, picked us up, inserted us in that LZ. And Delta Company was already there because they'd had a fight the day before. And when we got there, big meeting between Jeff and I and Captain Rawlison, who was the Delta Company commander, Jimmy McCall, who was his lieutenant, and Lucas, about we're going to do a joint assault of Hill 1000. And are you familiar with Hill 1000?
I am familiar with it.
the topography of it?
Yeah, but you should explain that because we've got a larger audience here.
Hill 1000 had 2 knolls on it. An eastern knoll that was closer to the LZ.
Right.
And a western knoll, which was about a good ways at the bottom from, you had to go, slope goes down.
Right.
Wider. from the LC. And at that point, we were Lucas was giving us the orders, and I made an inquiry of him. I said, look, why are we getting this mission to attack the Foothers? No, we only got 30 men.
Mm-hmm.
The Delta Company had, I don't know how what they had.
It's around 50 or so.
Well, I think it's more than that. It's more than that.
It's a bigger unit than yours anyway, by quite a bit.
Yeah, and he said, well, he told me, he said, Lieutenant Campbell said, they've got dead bodies he left up there, and they want to go get them. Well, I understood that.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So, that's what we did.
About how long do you think it would take for you to get into position? Because you've got to hump through the jungle.
We were there, we were told at the briefing, and they were doing it while we were talking. I mean, they had artillery barrages for hours going on Hill 1000, air strikes and the works. They did it. And they were firing those as we were. Delta Company didn't have to go 100 yards and up the hill. We got to go down here 600, 700, 800 yards and go up and get in position. So it was us getting in position with them. Right. Once we were in position, attack the two nodes.
Okay. Now, when you're going up your side, were there enemies shooting down at you yet, or?
No, the Hill 1000 was so bombed out.
Mm-hmm.
It was. They've been bombing it for a good while.
Yeah.
It had just. It's like
the moonscape kind of?
Yeah. I mean, but the deadfall was there. It was it was trees in the jungle, but it had been just blown to pieces, and it was above the tree line, what I call the tree, down the hill, top of the hill, side of the hill, down to a point where the jungle was. Right. So when we got in line at the end of the jungle, that's where we were going to attack, and that's what we did. We called in, and they said we're in position, launch the attack. Then the gunships, gunships were flying around firing as we went up the hill. And, so what happened is we maneuvered up the hill and we started taking heavy fire. And, you'd have to ask, Jeff this, but I mean, my recollection of it is, when you're looking to your up and to the above you, for the fire, but you can't see anything. And in fact, what happened was the fire was coming from the other node across, but you're thinking it's in front of you, because the other node, who would they be shooting at? Was Delta Company. Right. But Delta Company did not come out of the woods.
Okay. Well, but you got, I think, in the other accounts, you sort of got up to the crest, so you get to the top of one knoll, or at least to the sides of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm saying to move up, but it was a figuring out. It was for myself anyway. What's happening? Right. Is it up? I didn't realize it. I just knew bullets were flying everywhere in the ground. I was thinking they were in front of me, but in fact they weren't. They were coming from the other knoll.
So is there an angle from the other knoll where
that hand to
they can get at the side of it? Right. Okay. So you're taking fire, and now you get up there and
we get on top of the knoll.
Okay. And now what happens?
Well, the first thing when you get on top of the knoll, the one thing you can do is see. You can see the whole picture. You can see down the other slope as well as the one you came up, and you can see the top of the knoll, is this. So, but the draw, it's a draw between them, between the two knolls. And we were taking fire, we were returning fire. Machine guns set up, doing all this, that, and the other, and fighting.
Now, do you try to advance across between the two?
What happened was, Lucas was flying over in his helicopter. And he gave Charlie Company the order to assault across the saddle. When you do that, it's like this. When you're here to getting to the
Yeah.
bottom, you're receiving plunging fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's a no-no in the Army. They teach you that.
Right.
Because it doesn't make a difference if you get in a hole or not.
Yeah.
They're shooting down on you.
Yeah.
Not, it's different from the slope here shooting down on you. You've got holes and stuff you
Yeah.
can get in.
And they'll shoot over your head, but now you're exposed, even if you're prone or
Right.
lying flat.
Doesn't
you
make
can still
any
be hit.
difference.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, Jeff and I were on top of Firebase. I mean, we're in the same, we came to the same point.
Yeah.
And I said, this is insane. Tell them to get Delta Company in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doing nothing. They didn't come out of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
One person did, Jimmy McCall, my friend. Very brave man. And Lucas came back on the horn, and I said, that's what I said.
Mhm.
And I said, Lucas came back on the horn and gave us a direct order,
Mm-hmm.
a direct order to attack across the saddle now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we had the machine guns, and Jeff, and he was gonna, I was gonna, when we had assaulted the hill, we had two elements,
Mm-hmm.
fire and support.
Right.
You know, fire, and so I was the maneuver element.
Mm-hmm.
Got up there, I said, well, Jeff turned to me and said, well, Jim, we gotta carry out the order. I was looking at the ground, trying to figure out what the best way is. That's what Captain Vasquez taught me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, well, how are we gonna do this? It looked like you could get here, there was something you could, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I said, I'm gonna take them. And Jeff said, no, I'm gonna take them. He said, he told me, he said, if I'm gonna command this company for the next 6 months, I gotta show them I can do it. Very, very courageous, brave man.
Mm-hmm.
One of my heroes. And he did. And he got, you know, I was in the support, just had my machine guns
Right.
trying to cover him and shoot, and grenades and all that, but it didn't matter. The fire was too intense.
So how many men is he sort of taking forward with him?
How many went?
How many men went forward?
It would have been, well, we only had 30 men.
Yeah.
You know,
So it's like his
half of
15?
us were in the maneuver, half of us were something, you know, had a machine gun team, you know, here.
Right.
But I had two machine gun teams. They needed to be where I was to
Right.
support
Right.
the attack. And they could shift their fire, so
So how far did they get?
they didn't get anywhere. Got shot up, all boom, boom, boom. Which I knew was gonna happen.
Okay. And how many men did you lose?
We lost 2 in that incident
Okay.
within about 15 seconds.
All right.
And about a bunch of others shot up.
All right. And then I guess in Jeff's account, he talks about sort of one of them was one of the regular soldiers, but the other was your medic, right?
The medic had been there 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, he came in, he might have come in with me
Yeah.
the day before, day or
Right.
2
Right.
before.
He did.
He didn't know anybody.
Mhm.
Nobody knew him. He didn't know anybody. And I told him when I got there, because my medic had been killed on
Mhm.
902.
Right.
He was a conscientious objector. So was the one on 902.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't carry a weapon. And he just didn't have time to know what he was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I told him, I said, you don't go to a wounded soldier. You let me get the wounded soldier to you. I can't afford to lose you.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that. He ran out, tried to help the first guy, got shot,
Mm-hmm.
got killed.
Okay. So now you've got 2 guys out there who've been hit and probably killed. Could you get them out?
We got them all.
So
Yeah, we got
how'd you
them
manage
out.
to do that? I mean, if you got the enemy fire coming in and...
You go down there and get them. My soldiers did.
All right. And
The
then,
element that was in the maneuver element
Right.
got them.
okay, so they got him back.
Paul Berkey got one of them, and I can't remember his name. He was a Mexican trooper that hadn't been with me that long.
Okay.
Mexican American, and he went and got one.
All right. So you get the bodies back, and what happens at that point?
Well, at that point, we come back to we're still on the note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at that point, one thing we're doing is we're using a lot of ammo.
Okay. I'm going to pause right there because this tape is about. All right, we had gotten to the point where you were up on the top of the knoll on one end of Hill 1000. You got...
Retrieved the wounded.
Yes, you put them up with the wounded, yeah.
And the dead bodies, and we're on the top of Hill 1000.
Okay.
That point, a loach flew over. Fred Spaulding was flying, he was a
Yes.
passenger in the loach, and radioed down on the net that there was a large enemy element coming up behind us. And the question to me was, what does behind us mean? Which I never got an answer to. And y'all need to get off the hill. I'm assuming behind us is coming from the west side. At that point, Colonel Lucas came on the net and ordered us off the hill.
Right.
I didn't want to get off the hill because I knew what was going to happen. All they were going to do is order us to do it again, and I was there.
Right.
And Jeff, I don't know, he said, "Jim, we got to get off the hill," and he was right. I was wrong. I wasn't wrong about them ordering us to go back up the hill, but I knew what was going to happen. Then we had dead and wounded soldiers. We got to get off the hill.
Right.
The enemy's still over here, and as you come off the hill, they're shooting at you.
Yeah.
The way they were when we went up the hill. Delta Company didn't cover us, didn't do nothing. They left. We come down the hill, and we're 800 yards from the LZ, and we have to take them back to the LZ. I want you to keep in mind, it was about 105 degrees this day. We made this assault with LBEs, so we only had a canteen of water.
Yeah.
And it's been taking time.
Right.
People got dehydrated. Anyway, make a long story short, we get back to the LZ. And we couldn't keep up. They had the wounded soldiers, and I thought Jeff took the group and the wounded soldiers back. They were, they could move. You couldn't drag the bodies. It's too exhausting to do it, to keep up. So Jeff, Paul Berkey and me and a couple of other guys, I wish I could remember their names. I can't remember them. We were dragging the bodies back. And so we were late getting back to the LZ. And anyway, we finally got back to the LZ, and we were exhausted. And I wasn't on the LZ, I was on the perimeter where I came into the perimeter, and I was lying on the ground, and a friend of mine brought me some water and a cigarette. Jimmy McCall, a buddy from Delta Company.
Right.
And they started sending people down there. Jeff had already gotten back, so and gone to report to the TOC. And they wanted me to come to the TOC. Hell, I couldn't even get up. And finally, got some water in me, felt a little better, and went on up to the TOC. And, got the order to reassault the hill.
Now
Did the same thing.
Okay, now this is sort of still at the LZ. You're not back up on Ripcord.
No.
Okay. And is Colonel Lucas there?
Yeah.
So he's ordering you to
He's
go
the
back.
one that wanted to sing.
Okay. So he gives the order to go back up the hill, and then what happens?
I started discussing with him. I had a dialogue with him about it. And I was telling him, first of all, I was a student of Captain West.
Mm-hmm.
A slow learner, but one that nevertheless learned a little bit.
Right.
They taught me the ground was everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way. We had two guys that were having heat. Two guys that heated. They were, you know, they weren't, all they needed was some liquids and time.
Right.
And we were down now to, you know, 20 men.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, I was arguing with him. I said, we can't do this. This is in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, we can't do this. People, they've been fighting all day since daylight. I mean, since we got in the fight. I said, and they're exhausted. So, plus we lost a medic.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a medic.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, the dialogue was between me and Colonel Lucas, and harsh words were, and it was more or less, it was about we can take that hill tomorrow.
Yeah.
We can take it. I know how to take it. Now that I've seen it.
Yeah.
The assault was too wide.
Right.
You take the saddle out of it. You need to attack the hill from the other side. There was a lot more cover on the back flip side of the hill went down. And he didn't. You know, some things were said between me and him. And,
So what does Jeff do?
well, I said some words were exchanged between me and the Delta Company commander.
Oh, Delta Company commander. Okay.
I made a comment about it, and Lucas got mad, real mad at me,
Mm-hmm.
and ordered me to go down to the cool-off. And Jeff took me. Now, if you go back and get the cool-off, so Jeff grabbed me. We went down the hill there. And I guess I cooled off.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, you know. And Jeff went back up there.
Yeah.
And what happened? They then withdrew the order to assault that afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Late in the afternoon, they called
Yeah.
that thing
But,
off.
but Jeff had his own words with Colonel Lucas too.
He didn't. No one ever said anything in my meeting with them. It was me, Jimmy McCall, Rollison,
Right.
Jeff, and Lucas. It was
Right.
a dialogue between the two of us. Because he'd been there before.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I left, when I was banned from the meeting, we were told to go cool off.
Yeah.
Jeff went back up there
Yeah.
and talked with him. So
That's
I wasn't privy
right,
to
and
that.
that's part of his part of the story and in his interview. Okay.
Right.
But ultimately, then the end of the day, so the assault is called off, and then what happens to you and the company at that point?
Well,
Do you stay there? Do you go back to the
no,
base?
we stayed there for NDP there
Yeah.
that night on that LZ, because we were going to attack the hill the next night.
Right. So what happens the next day?
Next day they said, you're not going to, they called off the attack.
Mm-hmm.
Said, you're not going to attack the hill. Go back to Ripcord, which is not a short, it's a relatively short distance.
Mm-hmm.
They got new troops for, you know, we had, I think 19, 20 men.
Yeah.
They had new troops come in, you know. And Charlie come in, the orders to go toward Hill 805,
Mm-hmm.
which we did. And, you know, Jeff was the company commander, we did.
Mhm.
And then, I think we were out there a day or two, I can't remember, a day, 2 days, maybe I think it was 1 day. And we swapped out with Alpha Company, who was securing Raleigh, because we didn't have any troops. They were full strength.
Yeah.
And at that LZ that we first went into, when I said we attacked Ripcord,
Right.
and Chuck Hawkins came in with Alpha Company, of course went up toward Hill 805.
Right.
And then, at some point in time, while we were on O'Reilly, they command changed.
Mm-hmm.
And Captain Lamb took over the company.
Right.
And then we went from there out to help Don Workman's company.
Mm-hmm.
Our
That's D1506. Yeah.
D1506 with Delta Company,
Right.
Rawson's company,
Mm-hmm.
to extract them. That took all day to get them out.
Mm-hmm.
That was another story. And then that was, when we came out, that was July 21st.
Mm-hmm.
They extracted Delta Company, Charlie Company, and Delta Company of the 1st, the 5, and 6. They had a lot of dead.
Yeah.
They didn't get them all. They didn't get them out, but they had a lot of wounded soldiers.
Right.
Don Workman's company.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being, we got pulled out, brought back to Evans.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day was, Charlie Company for all purposes was back in the rear with
Right.
30 soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
trying to, we weren't really effective as that small a unit. And then they went in and the Delta Company went back and got on the 23rd
Mm-hmm.
to get the Alpha Company
Right. And that's when Ripcord's abandoned.
and
And
Ripcord was abandoned.
all right. Now, once Ripcord is abandoned now, do you now move out of the field? Is that the end?
Yeah,
of
they
your-
didn't have, you gotta understand, the structure, the battalion structure was wiped out.
Yeah.
Lucas was killed, the S3, Major Tanner was killed, Charlie Lee was the S3 air, he was wounded. Gary Waters was the liaison officer out there, he was wounded.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had to replace the whole staff. And at that point, they offered me a job in the battalion,
Mm-hmm.
which I took, and then the company, after the stand down, to reconstruct the company.
Right.
New lieutenants, new commanders, everybody came in during that week, and the company, the battalion deployed out back, not at Ripcord, but in the Catherine Roxon area.
Yeah.
And I went with them, and was out there, I don't know, a month in the forward fire base, and then I went to the rear, the job I was supposed to have.
Okay. So what job was it that you had in the rear?
I was in charge of the rear TOC,
Mm-hmm.
radio, TOC, the Tactical Operations Center
All right, and that's back on Camp Evans?
on Camp Evans.
Okay, and how long did you do that job?
No, D-Rose, till I D-Rose,
Okay.
and probably a month and a half, 2 months.
Okay. So you spent a lot of your time actually out in the field as a platoon leader then, rather than
Right.
being in a staff job after half of it.
Steve Wallace and I spent more time out there than anybody. He spent more time than me.
Okay. All right. And what were your actual duties in the rear? I mean, you're in the rear TOC. What's the job?
What was my job? I was designated the rear liaison officer in charge of the rear TOC.
Okay.
What was my duties?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because they were just worthless. The whole place, I mean, we didn't do nothing
Mm-hmm.
of any significance.
Yeah. And the battalion wasn't doing too much yet either, probably, in the field.
Well, they were out in the fire. Like I say, I went out with them on the fire.
Yeah.
I was out there for a while, then I went back. I should have done a lot better than I did, but I didn't.
You're kind of beaten up by that time.
No. Just had a bad attitude.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, do you remember much about what sort of life was like on Camp Evans? Were there?
I didn't. I mean, Camp Evans was just buying time, waiting time to go home.
All right.
I mean, of course, the conditions are a lot better than
Yeah.
being out in the bush.
Yeah.
You ate good, had a meal, good, hot meals, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Had a beer, drink a beer.
Okay. Were there morale or discipline issues back there? Do they have drug issues or race issues or much that you noticed?
Yeah, there were. I never had any,
Mm-hmm.
but there were. And can I go off the record?
Back into your story here.
Now, I want to say this about it.
Okay, you're on record now.
Okay. I had a lot of black soldiers that served under me.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of one. They were magnificent soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Did everything that you asked of them. I don't think any differently of them as soldiers as I do any of my other soldiers.
Right.
And they were great soldiers in the field, with the exception of one, and I got rid of him.
Mm-hmm. And as it was a black soldier who helped get you oriented when you first got there.
He was magnificent, and others I had were too.
All right. Now you're kind of getting to the end of your year in Vietnam at this point. Do you count down the days, or just kind of go about it? And...
Just, like everybody.
Okay. All right. And now, what's the process by which they get you back to the States? You get orders one day that you're going to go.
Happened. I got orders, and of the 13 people I went over there with, to the 101st, I was the only one to do those.
Okay.
And I got on a plane late, and I was flying to Cameron Bay, and landed late. And when I landed, they told me, he said, all your buddies all your classmates, see, we all went over there, they all had the same D-Rose date, or in the club there getting drunk. And so I said, yeah, where is it? You went over there to it. Well, what I did was stay up all night drinking, but everybody was drinking all night and go sleep on the plane. Except I never got on the manifest. So I go stand in the line to get on the plane, and I'm not on the manifest. They say, you ain't going anywhere. You got to do another day. You get you tomorrow. That was the end of my. So I did actually a year and 1 day in Vietnam.
All right. And now where do you fly into in the U.S.?
McCord.
Okay. And what do you do once you arrive?
Well, I was released, they released me from the airport.
Mm-hmm.
I was an officer, and, I didn't get to go to Fort Lewis. They released me, and got on a plane at 1 in the morning and went down to visit some people.
Okay. Now, were you on leave at this point? Do you still have some months left in your pitch? Okay. And so where do you go then to finish out your enlistment?
Fort Polk.
Okay.
As a training officer.
All right. And what part of the training were you working?
I was a training officer at an AIT company.
Okay. And
took the AIT company. I was in charge of training.
Right. Now, did you try to do the best job you could with that, or just fill the time, or?
I tried to on a couple of occasions to do some things that were positive, and got in trouble for it.
So they had a program they wanted you to follow, and you're just supposed to do it.
I did one on map reading, which I didn't want to follow their stupid program and show them how it was in Vietnam, and the other one was again on the formations. Both times I got chewed out, so I said the hell with it.
Now, had anybody made an effort to get you to re-enlist or stay on longer?
Yes.
Okay. And what's your response to that? In polite terms.
When I was at Fort Polk, I was out on training, and I got a phone call from the Pentagon. I don't know what the term is, but he was a 3-star general. And I was out in the bush, out training. And I called him when I got back there. Said this general at the Pentagon called me and asked me to call him. Wants to talk to me. Well, I was thinking I might have been in trouble for something that happened when I was on R&R. I got in some trouble, and but he was calling, wanting me to re-enlist. Had my file in front of him, and I said, "No, I'm not doing that." And he asked me. He said, "I'll tell you what, Lieutenant. I'll give you any assignment in the Army. And I said, I don't think so. He said, well, what about this? You think about it, and I'll call you back 30 days before you do separate. And he did. And I said, thank you, but no thank you, and got out.
All right. Once you're out, okay, now what do you do?
Well, I was real bummed then. I was waiting to go to law school, see, but I got out in March.
Right.
So I had that period of time between March and September for law. I went to Europe, kicked around there for 2 or 3 months, hung out. It was pretty worthless. But I wasn't married, so,
Right.
you know.
Now, how much were you seeing either at home or in Europe, sort of anti-war movement or protests or things like that? Is that?
I just never paid much attention to it. I never did.
It might not have been a really big thing in Shreveport or whatever anyway.
No, I mean, I was more interested in the ladies.
Right.
If you will.
All right. So then do you start law school then in the fall?
I started law school in the fall, went there, graduated in 3 years, and moved to Shreveport, and been practicing law since 1975.
Okay. Now, aside from after that first X number of months of kind of bumming around, what sort were there? Did you have any other issues in terms of adjusting back to civilian life after the time in the Army?
I had no problem. I had a great set of friends that helped me a whole lot with that. I mean, they filled that vacuum for me.
Right.
I didn't have that problem a lot of people did.
Okay. And now, would you talk to people about what you did in Vietnam?
Not then.
At what point do you?
Nobody was. I don't think. I never did, but I don't think anybody was interested.
So, at what point do you start talking to people? Or was it getting involved with the Ripcord group that did that for you, or Keith Nolan's book, or earlier than that?
Well, I had a. Let me see, about 1980, 81 in there. I started having some problems with Vietnam. When I left Vietnam, I was very bitter. Very bitter. And primarily about what had happened. So,
Right.
and so, you know, a few other things. And, you know, I used to think about, I got to thinking about it. You know, you get your work life and you're doing things and raising your kids and whatever. And I had a problem. You know, I was having a problem with it. And I went to the VA. They helped me.
Okay, they were helpful even in the early 80s. They were starting to do something useful. Because they didn't offer a lot for most guys when they first come back from Vietnam.
Yeah.
Kind of got just put back
Well, I
in
never
society.
would have thought of it. I just moved on in my
Right.
life, you know, trying to. And so I did that.
Okay. And how did you wind up connecting with the Ripcord Association?
Jimmy McCall, my friend from Delta Company, he sent me an order. He's the only one I was stayed in touch with all
Right.
those years. Because he lived in Baton Rouge, he lived in a football game. And he sent me an article Chuck Hawkins had written with his number in it. And I called Chuck up. And that was a month before the Fredericksburg reunion. And he'd been in contact, you know, he'd been in it a while.
Right.
And so I went to that reunion, met my Sergeant Berkey and Doc, some Bill Tipton and some others. And from there, I got connected, involved in it, and which has been a great experience. These are great men.
Yeah. That's become pretty clear, at least to me as an outsider. Yeah, it's a remarkable group of people. And I'd just like to close out here by thanking you for taking the time to come and talk to me.
I think the Ripcord story is about the soldiers, the enlisted soldiers. You know, the tendency is to focus on officers, but the soldiers made officers look better is because of them.
Yeah. And part of the
I
story.
have some awesome men that served under me and that I respect and admire more than any people in my life.
And they're still doing their jobs even that late in the war, which people don't always expect to find.
They were unbelievable.
All right.
And tough men under tough conditions. And I just think I love them all.
All right. Thank you.